called me in Portland and said, "Man, I just went in for this audition for this show called ER. It's amazing. You got to read it." And I hadn't even heard of it, and then it was just like this pushback, which I'd never experienced. I had a really good agent at the time, so I was getting in things. So there was all this pushback, and I never understood it until I think you might have been the first person after I got the job to break it down.
Yeah.
And I was still like,
But, and just know, Eric, that one of my favorite parts about my job and my career is that I was an advocate for things. And I felt confident enough to tell Barbara and not ask, but jeopardize a little bit of my stature with her, to just tell her, this rule is effing stupid. And the important thing is that this show gets the greatest cast because it has the greatest upside, maybe of anything that we'll ever do. Welcome to Right for the Role, the podcast. I'm your host, John Frank Levey. Thanks for joining me as I sit down with friends and colleagues to explore the journeys they've taken to discover the roles they're right for, both professionally and personally. As you listen, it's my greatest hope that you'll find inspiration, motivation, to embrace the roles in your life you were always meant to play. And now I'd like to introduce my guest, Eriq La Salle. He may be best known for his groundbreaking role as Dr. Peter Benton on ER, for which he received 3 NAACP Image Awards and nominations for a Golden Globe and 3 Primetime Emmys. But those 171 episodes are just a small sample of the game-changing work he's done over nearly 4 decades. Eriq is a multifaceted talent whose work behind the camera as a director and producer is equally prolific. He's directed feature films, made-for-TV movies, and popular TV series, including Chicago PD, CSI Cyber, Law and Order, and countless others. And he's a writer. Not only did he pen an episode of The Twilight Zone, which made WGA's list of 101 best written TV series, but he's also a critically acclaimed author of a trio of thrillers in his Martyr Maker series, which includes Laws of Depravity, Laws of Wrath, and most recently, Laws of Annihilation. Today we get into how Eriq realized his creativity has no bounds. Eriq, I'd like to start off first just by saying I'm so glad that you opened to doing this and to welcome you. It's so much fun. We recently got to see each other at a wedding of a mutual friend, and I don't know about you, but I had such a great time gabbing with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. Yeah.
Good. I'd like to start off by telling you a little story that's in my book that I've told before, but I think sort of sets up a context of the kind of conversation I'd like to have with you. 16-year-old Johnny was in Harlem in New York City getting on a bus with people from the Congress of Racial Equality to go to the March on Washington in 1963. And we left probably around 8 o'clock at night. It was dark, and the whole bus ride to Washington, we sang all of the civil rights songs. And I'm sorry for all the people who were sitting near me, because Sing Johnny One Note was actually written for me. But we were up all night singing and laughing and camaraderie and, excitement about the event. And we got to the site in front of the Lincoln Memorial very early in the morning. The sun was just coming up, and we were among the first groups to arrive. And so we got a place, right? I'm a theater nerd, so I would say right of the podium where the speakers were going to be. And we spread our blankets and we sat down, and there were some preliminary speakers and some musical stuff. And then finally, the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. got up on the stage, and he began to deliver what, for my money, is the most important speech of the 20th century. And 16-year-old Johnny promptly fell asleep. And so I was having a dream at the same time that Dr. King was. And in a funny way, this morning when I was thinking about talking to you and about how some of the research we've done and just knowing you, that race has been an important part of your triumphs and your obstacles. And I thought it was a perfect metaphor because even sympathetic white people are really asleep about racism and its impact because we have no personal experience of it. I was hoping that you'd be open to putting race into the conversation we have today. And I'd like to start at the beginning. You grew up in Connecticut, in Hartford, is that right? And you were one of four siblings, but you were the one who had a creative dream. And can you tell us a little bit about where that dream came from?
Well, I think that, I mean, I don't know that one ever really knows where a dream comes from, but I think the dream becomes significant when all we want to do is excel at something. I think when we excel at something, whether it be sports, arts, engineering, numbers, whatever, it makes us feel special. And I think, I was, growing up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, pretty much an all Black neighborhood. Of course, there was a sort of preconception of, you know, being an athlete, that expectation. And so I was honest enough with myself back then. I was like, I didn't have that passion for it. I loved, recreationally, I loved playing ball like everyone else, but there was nothing like if it's raining outside, I'm like, yeah, I don't really need to go out and play. And, I think people that the LeBron James and Michael Jordans, that's the point. They don't, nothing phases them because it's their passion.
Right.
So, when I was 14, so I used to write, probably starting at around 9 years old. And so, I'd write poetry, I'd write little short stories. So there was a little creative bug there, which I didn't know what it was. It was still sort of like larvae. And so at 14, I auditioned for the theater department, which had been non-existent at my high school. It had been disbanded. So they had a drama club years ago. So they were trying to revive it the year that I was a freshman. And so I had a great plan that I would write this amazing play and they would perform it and I'd become famous and blah, blah, blah. And in my mind, and I show up and the drama teacher by the name of Paul Zions, he and I are still in touch. He goes, yeah, no, I need you to audition. It's for a play called Raisin in the Sun
Yes.
by the late, great Lorraine Hansberry. And basically, I'm so not interested in whatever fantasy you have about writing. This is what the deal is. So I auditioned, and then the bug hit me of, wow, I found something that I do better than most people around me.
Fantastic. It's funny that you mentioned Lorraine Hansberry because when I was in high school, I also auditioned for the senior play, and the director was Lorraine Hansberry's niece, Shawneel Perry Ryder. And uh, I think she'd probably be fired or maybe arrested in today's political climate because we used to fool around a lot in the acting class. And she took three of us into her office and cussed and slapped us. Uh, uh, and and then I went on to be an Emmy-winning casting director. My friend Mickey went on to be an Emmy-winning cinematographer and filmmaker. And my friend David ended up being a prominent Canadian cinematographer. So maybe it's okay to yell at your high school students when they're being jackasses.
It was a whole, look, it was a different time of when, how we were disciplined, how we were, everything has changed now. Things have I don't even want to get into that because that's a different thing. But but at the same time, there was a lot of love. You know what I mean? Like I feel sometimes people didn't necessarily know how to express it, and
Sure.
sometimes it came out that way. I think there was a lot of love. And I feel that's the difference. I think the difference between, a lot of times what somebody might call abuse now. And what I mean by that is, my mother my mother whooped my ass when I was, my mother was a single mother trying to herd all these working 2, 3 jobs. So my mother needed us to fear her, to keep us in check.
Yeah,
And when I became 18 and we talked about it, my mother lived in a constant state of fear. She's
sure.
raising little Black boys and she's raising little Black girls. Like she was in a constant state of fear. So she needed us. So it came from a place of love. And even she said, sometimes I was a little harder on you than I needed to be, and blah, blah, blah. So, but anyway, I think it's a different time. I think it was a very,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting because in an interview I saw you did sometime ago, you talked about how directors and producers have control and actors don't, and that control was an important thing for you to get. And I think that's interesting. You maybe that's one of the things you may have gotten from your mom,
well,
that
I
she
got,
needed control.
yeah, exactly. She needed control. I mean, what I get most of all, like I said, I think it was, my mother didn't understand the arts. I come from a very blue collar family. So it was really, it was instilled in you, this thing that was like inculcated where you grow up, you go to high school, maybe go to college, but, you get a good blue collar job and it's stability.
Yeah,
So then, I come along saying, I want to try this arts thing. You have to realize when we talk about race and the influence of race in one's journey, it starts so early. It's just not
yeah.
a matter of what roles I go. Before I even got into it, there weren't many people that looked like me,
No,
confirming,
absolutely. And
confirming
that's one of the
that
things
I
that's
knew this.
really changed
Yes, that
is
changed, but they
that
weren't.
now a young Chinese American girl will see Lucy Liu on television, and Lucy didn't
Oh,
see
yo,
anybody.
exactly. So, but you have to, back then there was Sidney Poitier, Bill Cosby, and the late great James Earl Jones, who
Yeah,
actually came, whose journey, who's throughout my journey has made several appearances, and I will always love him for that. But so we didn't have a lot of, and then in the '70s, of course, we had the black exploitation films, the Pam
right.
Griers, the Tamara Dobsons, Bernie Casey, like all the old Richard Roundtree, all the old school. But we really didn't have like this legitimate thing that allowed us to aspire to. So I think that's when it first started. So then but you get into it, and I went to school, got a really good training, went to Juilliard and NYU, and then I first get to Juilliard again. There are two of us, or one and
Yeah.
a half, because the other guy was biracial, and he identified white, and so there's me from Hartford, Connecticut. There's one of the first things one guy told me, and I had no idea what to do with this. White guy from like Rhode Island or something. And he comes up to me and he introduces himself at one of the, cocktail mixes or whatever, the early freshman welcome thing. And he literally says to me, and he didn't say it with malice, although it was filled with he said, "You're only the second Black person I've ever met besides my maid."
That's fantastically weird, but here's a funny version of the same thing. I got to the University of Rochester in 1965, and my first roommate was a guy from the dairy farm country in New York State. And he literally, again, without malice, said that I was the first Jew he had ever met. And he wanted to know if he could feel where my horns were.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know that Jews were supposed to have horns. So I thought maybe he was hitting on me. I don't know. It was confusing.
But it's, but
The
you go with
first,
that, you show up with, and that's how, that's why I think college is important, because obviously you start being exposed to different things and different
sure,
people of different orientations and culture and background, all that. And I think it's fascinating. But at the same time, you have to be strong, because there are going to be people that don't understand you. And again, things have changed dramatically now. We've had a Black president. We've had, we've had all these. So there have been changes, but I can only speak to when I occupied that space and that time
right.
at 18 years old, and what that did.
Sure, you're finding yourself and you want to hold on to yourself, but you also want to expand yourself. Uh, you talked earlier a little bit about the concept of excellence and how it frees you up to feel special. And one of the things that I loved about being part of the community that we all created for ER together in our separate but unified ways was that sense of community that and that if we trusted each other to each of the department heads in the concept meetings, in the production meetings, we trusted each other and we knew that each of us was going to do our damnedest to make that episode great, and to feed you guys who were on the line. And that community, that sense of community, gave us all the opportunity to be more excellent than we could possibly be by ourselves, which was fantastic. I wanted to ask you, Eriq, the first big film you did was Coming to America, which is the thing I saw that made me interested in you for ER, which is interesting because it had nothing to do with Dr. Peter Benton. It was a black film. What was the audition process like for you on Coming to America?
Well, it was unique, and it was something that was impactful that I have to this day have still incorporated certain things from that particular audition. Well, so John Landis, who was at the height of his career, Animal House, Trading. I mean, he's just huge. So he kind of called the shots, and so this is 1987-ish, and so directors had a little more power before it became more. They were really truly the captains of the ship. So they made it. So anyway, so I'm auditioning, but at that time I'd also been the process of you audition for something. You've got the casting person, you've got this. Now all of a sudden these producers have to weigh in. This has to weigh in. So it was always, but he stripped it back down to this one captainship thing. And so I remember auditioning, and I'll never forget, they didn't even let us on the lot at Paramount. Like I had to park on a side street off of Melrose. And it was in the fall, it was dark early. So I just remember going in at like 4:30, it was already turning dark. And I go in and everybody's there. And I go and I audition, and I notice he's spending more time with me than, because actors are very aware of that. Like
Absolutely. I was always very conscious of that.
Yeah, who's in the room. So sometimes
Of course, Eriq, sometimes you're only with somebody for as long as it takes because you go, I don't want to mess him up because what he just did is perfect.
And actors
and then everybody else thinks that we hated you. But in fact, we loved you. So it's don't strategize.
It goes both ways. But when you're a young actor, I was definitely aware of that. And he worked with me, did some things, kept laughing, and then he just turned to me. And this is the part that still impacts me, and it's something that I do whenever I can. He just turned to me and said, "Okay, I'll see you on set."
Oh man!
I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll see you on set." And I go, well, but and well, I think you and I have our own experience of how dense I can be sometimes. They're trying to tell me
I'm just about to get to that.
Yeah, but I'm just dumbfounded because I think it was the first time in my career I met someone that had that much power.
Right.
Didn't have to check with the committee. He didn't have to get approval. His word was word. And so I needed to understand that. And so he finally just turns to me like, "You idiot. You have the role.
Yeah.
I'll see you on set." And he goes, "That's it. That's all." And I go, "Oh," and now I'm like, let me get out of here before I blow it. And I just remember leaving there
or before you burst into tears.
Yeah. So I left there and I just, damn near skipped to my car and hooped and hollered and it was cool. And so I said, so now as a director, whenever I can, now, of course I work, primarily in television. So there is always a process. But when I was running Chicago PD, I would a lot of times tell people in the room. And that's, again, the old-fashioned way of auditioning.
Sure, absolutely. The only person on ER who got the job in the room was Parminder Nagra. John had seen the Bend It with Beckham film, and he asked me to set up a meeting, and I did. And I was just dumbfounded when he said, "Well, I want you to. We're going to make you. We're going to make a part for you." And she was similarly dense. she couldn't quite grasp it. But that
Yeah.
brings me to our mutual connection and our wonderful community and success that we all shared and contributed to, and that's ER. And you and I have had lots of laughs over the years about the obstacle that we had to overcome. A famous casting executive who ran Warner Brothers and was my boss, Barbara Miller, who had rules. And casting is much too mercurial to have to live in a world of rules. It's you got to have freedom to be able to do it well. But one of her rules was that if somebody was interested in an actor for another show in Warner Brothers Television, that no other Warner Brothers Television casting director was allowed to pursue them. It would be okay if somebody from Paramount wanted you or somebody from Universal wanted you, but we weren't allowed to compete. And you were on they were interested in you for another medical show that was going to shoot in the Pacific Northwest.
No. I was doing with Karen Silas. I was doing a cop show
Oh, right.
in
Uh,
Portland, and what was it called? I'll remember it. Under Suspicion. Um,
yes, I'm sorry. You're right.
Doing a
It
show
was
called
Under
Under Suspicion.
Suspicion.
But this was the problem that I had with Barbara, and this is why I was so angry for so many years. I was a glorified extra that show.
But
ER.
weren't you were it looked like you had a bigger part when you started and then they diminished it for budget reasons?
No. I was always one of. It was basically a woman at the heart of a homicide team. It was her story. Peter Onorati played, I believe, the boss. So they were the two, and the rest of us just were, I mean,
Uh-huh.
look, we have like 10 lines per episode. Just
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
glorified extra. And so the main issue I had with Barbara was this is a role. I was not even a regular. I was a recurring.
Uh-huh.
The other thing, ER was a career-changing role
Yeah, no
compared
kidding.
to glorified extra. And then look, if it was like, oh, he's the lead on a show, I get whether I agree with it or not. I get it.
Right.
But I was not under contract. I was not a regular. I was a recurring, and it was a small role.
Yeah.
And everyone was going in. And my best friend, Michael Beach, was the first one that he called me in Portland and said, "Man, I just went in for this audition for this show called ER. It's amazing. You got to read it." And I'm going, usually he and I are neck and neck, and we're going in. And I hadn't even heard of it, and then there was just like this pushback, which I'd never experienced. I had a really good agent at the time, so I was getting in things. So there was all this pushback, and I never understood it until I think you might have been the first person after I got the job to break it down.
Yeah.
And I was still
But and just know, Eric, that one of my favorite parts about my job and my career is that I was an advocate for things, and I felt confident enough to tell Barbara and not ask, but jeopardize a little bit of my stature with her, to just tell her, this rule is effing stupid, and the important thing is that this show gets the greatest cast because it has the greatest upside, maybe of anything that we'll ever do. And if because we tested your best friend, Mr. Beach, and I don't know if you know this story, but we were told you have the best 4/5 of an ensemble on television, and you can have Michael if you want to, but we're not completely convinced. That was Don Ohlmeyer, the president of NBC. And
Yep.
so Wells and Les Moonves and I were walking down the hallway after that, and they were like, "Don't pick up his option, don't pick up his option, don't pick up his option." And I was like, "Okay, but I gotta get Eric in." And I went back to Barbara's office after that test, and I said, "Look, Moonves and Wells just told me we can't pick up Beach's option, and I gotta get Eric in for this. I'm gonna." And then the next cut to you're lying in the hallway in Building 140 in scrubs. I think they were purple, but I could be wrong. And you're stretching like James Worthy and Magic Johnson did on the floor of the Forum back then. And you came in and you made me write, and you were right for the role, if I can shamelessly plug my memoir. And then we had 5/5 of the best ensemble to date on television. Yesterday I was waiting for my longtime partner to come home so we could go out to dinner with friends, and I was messing around on the stupid Instagram that I've become addicted to because it helped me promote my book. And I went onto the ER fan page, and I learned that Noah was being interviewed, and he said that after the pilot, when you and he were in a lot of scenes together, but that you were kind of reserved and serious, and that he actually recounted something which I thought was very funny. And also, back to the race question, he apparently said to you, "Oh, La Salle, that's an interesting name," and you said, "Slave name," and he felt kind of intimidated by that. But
Yeah.
apparently, as soon as the pilot was done, during that period of time between the pilot and the pickup, you called him and said, "You want to go to Spain?"
Mhm.
And he was completely dumbfounded because you had never even smiled at him during the whole pilot. And so he apparently said, "I'll call you back." And then he called George. And George said, "Oh no, God, don't do it. It'll be full of conflict. You'll hate each other. And then when we get picked up, it'll be a problem. I'll go with you."
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Typical Clooney. And then the three of you actually bummed around Spain for 6 weeks. And the
No,
band,
we were there for about 2.5 weeks.
well, somebody said 6 weeks, but in any event, and it formed a bond that was very important to the success of ER, that beginning of that forming of community, and that you all watched every episode. That first year at the Emmys, you took one limousine all together to the ceremony, and it just was such a lesson for all of us that if you create community, the sum of the parts is bigger than everybody, and if the community is made up of people who already have a lot to offer, and you end up bigger than the sum of the parts, you really have that opportunity to create excellence.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought that was, it was really important because we were, it was just the opposite of what George feared. And he made a good point. He was like, you guys go there, have a falling out, you got to work with each other, blah, blah. But and then literally, his own logic was, it's a stupid idea. I'm coming, right?
Right, exactly.
But it did have just the opposite because we came back locked and loaded. We had great stories. We had shared stuff. We bonded, and so it made it easy. It made it
And clearly, I mean, I'm giving you this. Clearly, that was your intent when you made the invitation to Noah, was that you wanted to create a relationship and a connection. And that was very wise of you.
Let's go have a good time. And we were really fortunate because ER ran so much on chemistry, and we were able to establish a great chemistry, and it paid dividends for years. So yeah,
many years, and it changed a lot of our lives. I hate having my picture taken. I always have. I'm so uncomfortable being the center of attention, I guess, that I always make funny faces, and there's a famous picture of me as a hippie with an orange traffic cone on my head. Imagine that. When it came time to have a picture taken for the flap of my memoir, Right for the Role, I was introduced to a photographer named Eusebio Hernandez. And he made me feel so comfortable and relaxed that we got a great shot. If you're looking for headshots, I strongly recommend that you contact Eusebio Hernandez, and his contact information is available on the show notes. You know, one of the things that changed in my life is that at a certain point, Mr. Crichton, Mr. Spielberg, and Mr. Wells gave all of us on the crew and the office staff a bonus or a present. I remember his then assistant called me and said, "Come on over to the conference room. There's an important meeting." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm kind of busy, but do I have to?" And he's, "Yeah, come over." I got there and they announced that they were giving us a check. And I thought, oh, well, this is cool. And maybe it'll be $5,000, or God, wouldn't it be cool if it was 15 grand? And then I was walking back to my office with this envelope in my hand. And in typical ER fashion, a guy from the prop department was about 10 yards in front of me, holding however you say that word, a baby by the foot. And the baby was, sort of hanging anyway, upside down. So I opened the envelope, and it was a hell of a lot more than $10,000. And I used that money to buy the house across the street from me for my mom for the last 3 years of her life. And I wondered if you ever had an opportunity to either emotionally or practically gift your mom for her support of your wacky, crazy dream.
Yeah, I mean, my mother, has passed away, but we had a really cool relationship, and like I said, my mother didn't quite understand the arts when I first got into it, but it was great to, I started early, like, I flew her out for the premiere of Coming to America. You know what I mean? So so right away, and her being able to witness that was very important to me.
Yeah. Well, she must have just been, especially since she didn't understand the world, just flabbergasted that you, rang the bell at the county fair with that, I mean, the extraordinary success that you've had, as I said in the intro, not only as an actor, but as a director and a producer, and now as a novelist. Where the hell did you find the time to, in your busy life, to write 3 novels? How disciplined could you possibly be that you made the time for that?
And that's what it is. I think it's this. So you mentioned a word early on, and I think I had mentioned, and you threw it back. It was the word control, and control not in the egotistical way.
Yes, not controlling others, but controlling yourself.
Trying to have control of your destiny. So ironically, just before ER, a year and a half before ER, I replaced Denzel Washington in a film where he was playing a love interest to Michelle Pfeiffer. And it was an interracial story. And so there was this big search after he dropped out. Who's going to replace him? I end up getting the role. I go to North Carolina. I'm working like crazy on it. They come to me one morning. The director, this story is going to be interesting for you. The director comes to me as we start shooting, and he's like, "You are doing such fantastic work. I just want you to know, I know you can't see the dailies. Michelle's one of the producers, so she gets to see everything, but you just have to trust me. You are killing it." So I'm like, great. And 3 days later, producer knocks on my apartment door that they had rented for me there, and says, "We're looking at dailies. You look too young to play Michelle Pfeiffer's love interest, so we're going to have to let you go." And I was absolutely devastated.
Yeah, of course.
Because I was like, I was doing everything right. I flew my mentor in to strength. So anyway, long story short, I went and spent a bunch of money because I bought an apartment after with Coming to America money, but I didn't fund it. I didn't furnish it yet. So I go and have this crazy spending spree. I spend a ton of money and because they still had to pay me. So, and then I go, okay, now what? The following week, I enrolled in filmmaking classes.
Oh, wow.
The reason was it was a means of, I didn't want to be, and it's so funny now to say this, but back then I thought 50 was like super old. So I was like, I don't want to be 50 years old and them still doing this kind of thing to me. So I need more control. That's how I started directing. And so you just find a way. Then another impactful thing happened to me. Before George broke out, this was early into the process. Maybe the show had been on for 2 months. We were, being celebrated. And so George comes to set one day and he goes, "Hey, there's a film called The Man with the Football. They've been trying, Warner Brothers has been trying to do it for years. They went out to Arnold, Mel Gibson, all of these people. He said, they just offered it to me. And they were going to pay him $1 million.
Jay.
Wow. Okay. And that same afternoon, I got a call from my agent saying, "Hey, there's a project, first time director. They want you to audition for the sixth lead, and you're going to be paid scale." What they did was just show me the difference in our value, because like I said, this was before George, quote unquote, broke out. This is when we were an ensemble and we were getting this thing. And this is never any slight against the artist. I'm just talking about the structure of the system.
And do you think that had a lot to do with race?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say race, it just simply means opportunities.
Yeah.
It just simply means that a studio didn't see the value. It didn't see as much value in an American having a lead role, or that's just how the system was. So yes, that is based on race. The same thing can be said about women.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Same thing is said about women directors. Same thing is said about women actresses. So I'm just saying. So that's just how the system. Now we do what we can to change it and to soften it, but back then that was the reality. And so my point is that was another thing that showed me, no matter what you do, even if you do equal work, because at this point we're all being celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this point, this is just before his breakout, but at this point, we're being celebrated as equal, but we're not being viewed as equal by certain things. So it taught me that you're going to have to have more control of your destiny, because if you wait for the system to do it, you're waiting for a system that doesn't value you. So you will never. So that's where
whatever changes have happened have been forced by lobbying, by activism. You can't be passive and expect anything to change.
Well, but see, once I got into directing and then into executive producing, I also started realizing when we start saying race this, race that, it's not always directly race. Sometimes it's peripheral race. And what I mean by that is this: when I started directing, I would be in the room and I would say, "Hey, the role that they wrote, the judge role, why can't that be a Latina? Why can't that be a female? Why can't that?"
I've done that 1,000 times. Why can't that be a Black woman?
Right. But see what happened, the initial thing that I got, it wasn't a racist pushback. What I really discovered in that moment and in those moments was that it just wasn't how they thought.
No.
And so they would go, "Oh, and you go, "Well, wouldn't that make sense?" You know what I mean?
But why does that seem like a miracle? It's and I think you've hit on something really important, which is the reason that change has accelerated in the last whatever number of years is that there are more Black executive producers, more Latino showrunners, more women showrunners, and as a result, they don't think it's such a weird idea, because they see the world from their perspective.
Right, and that's why it's important for us for there to be diversity in the room, for there to be different points of view, so that and so back to your original question, I make time for these because it's also survival. Like, I had to become a director because I saw it as survival. I saw it as the longevity of a career, as opposed to a system that doesn't value me as an actor, then even though I'm at one point one of the highest paid, or still, one of the highest paid African American actors in television history, right away after ER, that value dropped significantly. I'm
Of
not
course.
saying like I expect to be being paid what I paid, but what I'm saying is my white counterparts. When we look at Friends, like a couple of years after I left ER, a few years, I was a big fan of the show 24, and they had a role that they wanted two episodes, the final two episodes, and they literally made me audition for it.
Yeah.
And I'm coming
Yeah.
off of the biggest show, and well, again, like I said, it had been a couple of years, but still, but it's safe to say that none of the males from Friends would be auditioning for a 2 episode arc on
On another comedy.
that's also so the
Yeah.
system, again, this is not a reflection against actors or my fellow artists. I'm
No,
just
of course not.
criticizing the system. And so
And my original point, was that even sympathetic white people don't see it. And they're surprised when they're confronted with the reality that that life is different for people of color than it is for white people, and that is something we need to wake up from.
yeah,
This brings me to something that I made you laugh, remembering at the wedding that we were at fairly recently. Um, and that is before you were one of the highest paid African American people in television in the history of television. You didn't have a lot of money, but then ER happened, and you started getting all that acclaim that everybody was getting, and all of a sudden, thousands of pairs of shoes and Hugo Boss suits arrived, and you said, "Mo free shit, mo free shit, mo free shit." And that made me laugh at the time so hard. And when I recounted that to you at the wedding, that
yeah.
giant Cheshire cat smile of yours emerged, and it was a pleasure.
Well, the ironic thing is when you're broke, nobody gives you anything free. When
Right,
you start making money, they give you all this free shit.
right.
I was like, okay, wow, more free shit. Okay, let's,
Exactly. Isn't
you
there a
know,
song about that? When you're down and haven't got a penny, then all your friends are there. But when you're rich, all your friends are around and want a little help.
yeah, God bless the child.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's
That's the song.
when we talk about what is the shift. Sometimes the only thing you can do, the only power you ever really have is to say no. That's really your only power, and particularly when you're a young actor starting out. And obviously, I was, this was 10 years into my career now. I graduated college in 84. This was 94. So, um, if you remember, it was a similar thing when they called and said, we want to make a deal for him to come in and test for ER. They came back, and I had done a couple of pilots. I had gotten a quote. And ER came in lower than that. And I don't know if you remember, but I actually said no.
I do remember.
I told my agent, I said, no. I said, this is a principal thing. They're not going to, I think they were coming in for the pilot like $10,000 less or whatever. Now, I said no. So my agent said, well, if they come, she said, are you sure? I said, yes, I'm sure. I'm tired of, hey, we love you, but we don't have enough money to pay you because we've paid all of the white counterparts, right? I was at some point, black people just get tired of that, hearing that shit, or, people of color or women just get tired of it. So you just go, you know what? No, if you don't value me, you don't value me. So my agent said something important. She said, okay, but I will tell you this. If they come back, that role is yours. I said, really? She goes, yeah. So I said, okay. So I went and shot pool that night. And this is back in the day before we even had cell phones. We were doing pagers, and I had a little device to check my answering machine. At 7 o'clock, I'm at the pool hall, the Hollywood Athletic Club, shooting pool, and I go and check my my voicemail by pressing this thing to the phone, and it rewinds my messages. And my agent said they came back and they came up. Go get the job. And that's how now, listen, sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Had I known that fighting for that extra $10,000 would have cost me millions, then it's a different thing. You
Yes,
said,
of course.
I didn't
Well,
know
no,
what to
and,
do.
and if you had known how much money was on the table at your audition, you would have frozen up and nothing would have happened. I just like to tell you the other side of that story. You know, Karen, my longtime partner, uh, who you met again at the wedding that we were at, she was the business affairs executive, and obviously she was operating under instructions about where to go. But I went up to her office and I said, I need Eriq La Salle. Find the effing $10,000 and find it now.
Yeah.
It was one of the times that I advocated because if it wasn't going to be you, frankly, I don't know who the hell it was going to be, because
And
the
that's
network
what it should be.
had already been cool about Michael. And, you know, and by the way, I wanted to ask you, and this is a personal question, and if you don't want to answer it, we'll edit it out. But how in the hell have you and Michael maintained the deep and everlasting friendship in the context of competition and millions of dollars? I mean, it's extraordinary that he hasn't uh, harbored jealousy. I mean, he's had a
No,
fantastic career and a great
yeah,
life,
no,
and he's
no,
a wonderful guy. I've hired him as series regulars, I think two times,
right.
um, and he was great on ER when he came in as well. But can you can you speak to that?
It's really simple. It's really simple. We, met in college, and one of the first things we said was, "No woman will come between us." Right. So, and that mentality then was, "No job will come between us," because here's the thing: it's really simple. What's meant for me, no one can take away. And this is where I lean more into the spiritual aspects of things. What's meant for me, no one can take away. What's not meant for me, no one can give me. So we can say, and he and I joke, this job is mine, this job is mine, this job is mine. But we say it sarcastically because ultimately you don't know what's yours. No matter how close you get. So he was the one that told me about the script. He sent the damn script to me.
Uh-huh.
But we had that relationship where instead of thinking of it as competition, we were secure enough to say, hey, man, I'm going in on this audition. Hey, I'm going in on this. So he
Yeah.
was maintaining the respect of what we had established, just as I had maintained it. So we never looked at it that way and said, of course, we get disappointed. There have been roles that he's gotten that I've been like, oh, fuck, I wish I had gotten that.
Yeah, sure.
We're honest about that, but not to a point where I want to take something from you that's not
No.
mine.
But Eriq, you got to give yourself and Michael credit that you both promised that to each other and fulfilled that promise, because um, I have actually seen two actors who were reading for the same role, and I went into an audition with somebody and then came back out and they were rolling in the parking lot punching each other.
wow.
And they were very close friends, and it turned out that a woman had come between them.
We were
One of their wives had been with the other one, and they were just beating the bejesus out of each other. And I didn't know it was part of my job description to separate angry
separate.
lovers. But there you
Yeah, no,
go.
that was, it's funny because we always maintain a sense of humor about everything, because 1984, that's when we were like, okay, no woman, no woman. And then we saw Purple Rain. And then we said, okay, maybe Apollonia can come between us. And we agreed. And we were like, okay, that's fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
You just said that the word spiritual, and your novels have been described as part thriller and part spiritual quest. Um, could you speak briefly about that?
Yeah, I think that, I write in the thriller genre because I did a movie by John that was based on a John Sanford book years ago called Mind Prey, and I was the producer and starred in it. And that got me hooked into this whole thriller thing. So I started writing thrillers. And so this series, which is actually 5 books, the first 3 have already been published. I just finished book 4 and working on book 5. But I always felt that the thriller genre could be injected with more depth. You don't have to just have a who's done it, we're going to catch the killer, the bad guy. What happens if your protagonists are as dysfunctional as your antagonist? What if, so it's not just the focus of catching the bad guy,
Sure.
it's at what cost? What will you
And understanding the bad guy and where it comes
understanding
from.
them and relating? Because I want to make my characters very three-dimensional and human and well-rounded. So it came from that. And then so each book really it's three cops. It's in the vein of the movie Seven, two detectives and an FBI agent. So each book they get to kind of have their own highlight of their journey. One doesn't believe in God, but he goes through a case where people are killing priests, and it challenges his belief.
Right.
One is detached from love, and he goes through this thing. So it really it gives a certain depth that I believe
Sure.
that's been lacking in most thrillers. I think the Attica Locks of the world, the S.A. Cosbys and they both happen to be African American. They've put Don Winslow, a great white writer.
Oh man, is he? I love his stuff.
Don Winslow. I mean, so I think that there's a way he doesn't write like straight thrillers,
No.
but he does some really cool suspense stuff. But I just felt for thrillers that we could elevate that, and that's what I want to do. And so I'm getting ready actually to start my next series after I finish up these other
Wow.
remaining two books. So you again, you find the time because the goal is, of course, to after five books is to turn them into a streaming series. So you have
Sure.
5 seasons. So I'm waiting for that to really go out and start shopping it. But that's the goal because again, I've always felt I have to create my own opportunity because the system that we're in doesn't necessarily create it for me. Or so all of this stuff is necessary: directing, producing, writing novels, all of it, because it gives me more opportunity to live up to my potential of what I see as my career. So that's where it comes
That's fantastic. I don't know yet who our audience is going to be for Right for the Role, the podcast, but I expect it's going to be a lot of young actors who are trying to figure it out. And I said in the introduction, that I have this hope that this will be motivating and inspirational, and the discipline and forward thinking and planning that and you called it survival, that has been at the root of your career is really remarkably inspirational. And I hope that the potential audience that I'm hoping will join us um, will see both how much work it takes, how much care it takes, how much protection it requires. Uh, you know, it's extremely hard, but it is a wonderful way to make a living. It's so satisfying to be part of a community and to be in a collaborative, respectful situation. I want to go back to ER for just 1 minute and give you one more accolade. I was always really impressed that how you took uh, the importance of playing a Black professional into the work and also into your advocacy for yourself and the character for Peter. Um, and I know John really well, and he is a kind and generous person. But I imagine you two were occasionally at loggerheads because of this idea that I presented at the beginning, that even the most sympathetic white men, white straight men who've had it good since the beginning of time, um, might resist being told that they're making a mistake or they're shortchanging something. And so that you had to find a delicate balance for advocacy, as I have as well over the years, had to learn how to say to the studio or the network that didn't want to approve somebody, instead of railing at them and cussing at them, just to try to, in a delicate and respectful way, and I haven't always succeeded at that, by the way, but in a delicate and respectful way to express your point of view. Did you and John occasionally have?
Oh, we had absolutely. Because I think there were times when you're just fighting for, sometimes people will make these fights about something bigger than what it is. And what
Right.
you're doing, you're saying, look, I'm just fighting for equality. And we can define equality differently, but if this is an ensemble show, so they didn't, here was a big one, as an example. They refused in the very beginning to ever have my character go on a date with a woman. I was either at the hospital, was always at my apartment. And in the meantime, my white counterparts, being mainly George and Anthony, they were going to these great dates. And I used to say, Black people go on dates as well, but it didn't quite register.
Right.
Ironically, like these guys, they would send them to jazz clubs. I'm like, okay, so not only do you not write, you even take our music and let
Right.
somebody
Exactly.
else go. Like, I can't, so yeah, so there was a lot of frustration that
And I
came.
remember also, Eric, that at a certain point you lobbied for you to have a Black
Absolutely,
romantic entanglement because you
absolutely.
had several relationships with white women, and that was not an image that you were
But
very
no,
happy
no, no,
about.
it wasn't. No, it wasn't that. What it was specifically was that the Black relationships that I had with women, or the relationship I had with Black women, were so dysfunctional and so imbalanced, and they lacked romance, they lacked true intimacy, they lacked just, again, basic things. So then they put me in an interracial relationship. Now, all those things that I wanted are now happening. I'm taking this white woman on dates. I'm showing a gentler, more kinder side of myself. Whereas with the Black women, we were always arguing. We were always, so it just showed like this dysfunction. Like Black people don't know how to communicate with each other. They don't know how to be tender towards each other. And Black women have, I feel, historically always gotten the shorter end of the stick across the board. I was not comfortable perpetuating this unfalse thing. I'm sorry, this untruth, this false perception that we don't communicate with you, we don't try. So what happened was, because they didn't listen to me and give me a balanced Black relationship, it inadvertently sent a message that a Black man will work harder when he's with a white woman than he will with a Black
Mhm.
woman. And I
That's
was like, look, that might be your point of view and your perspective. I will not be the face of that. Because I see that differently. And so once they put me in this interracial relationship, which I absolutely loved because our chemistry was amazing, and the
that
actress,
was with Alex
I
Kingston.
was with Alex Kingston, it was amazing. But had they done the Black relationships right, then I would have stayed. I would have been like, okay, this just happens to be a guy who. But
Right.
when you're only showing dysfunction on one side, and then you show great function and positivity,
Three-dimensionality and all
then
of that.
that makes a statement, whether you intended to make a statement or
Right.
not. And I just simply said, now you have to end this interracial relationship, and I want a positive relationship with a Black woman. And then I brought in Michael Michelle, and then we got to enjoy a lot of the things that I had been asking for 6 years, for 6 seasons. And so that all of that stuff was, really difficult and challenging, but I didn't know any other way. I don't know.
No.
I handle things the right way, but
That's what that I knew about that from the outside, not in any gossipy way, but I knew that there was conflict and that you were advocating for things that were important to you, and because there is institutional and systemic racism and it's real, uh, um, it behooves each of us to kind of push for change, and obviously always with respect and all of that kind of stuff. You don't want to end up screaming at each other because that's not productive. But we do.
it's not just change, John. See, that's the thing. Like when I say we make these things bigger than sometimes they need be. The importance is really big. But what I'm saying is this: simplify it. It's not about change, it's about truth.
Yes.
And so
Okay,
all
good.
I'm saying is my truth is the same as my white counterpart's truth. I'm a big food person. I love going to restaurants. I love being romantic. I love these things. But you're castrating. You're saying, no, that doesn't exist because you don't give us the opportunity. So you're denying my truth. So it's not that I'm asking you to change the world and create these truths that don't exist. I'm simply saying represent the truth. The truth is all people, Asian, Latin, Black, white, Native American, everybody has stories of intimacy and positivity and
Right.
tenderness. So for me to say for me to only show this group of people doing that, that maybe on some level that is a deeper racism because maybe you are saying, I only believe they're worthy of it. I don't know. But for
No,
me,
I think it's unconscious. I think it's because people are asleep
right,
and dreaming while Martin Luther King Jr. is having a dream. It's just that we just don't, like that idiot who said to you, "You're the first black person I've ever met except for my maid."
right.
Um, how could he have any understanding of black culture?
And he's
Uh,
17, he's 18 years old as well. So
right.
we're all dumb. I've done some dumb shit, at 18.
Of
So,
course,
you
that's
know what
what
I
you're
mean? So we
supposed
all
to do at 18.
yeah, but that was his thing. And you're like, okay, not sure how to deal with that. When the guy
Yeah.
said that to you, you're like, don't know what to do with this information. You know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out my own stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Eriq, I'm so glad that you agreed to join us today, and I think our audience is going to really benefit from hearing your story and our conversation. And just personally, I respect the hell out of you.
Same here. Same here. Always have. And you remember, after the audition, you were trying to let me know I got the job. And again, I was so dense. You're crossing the parking lot. And I remember it was me, Morris, and another actor, Morris Chestnut, because we had just tested and we came down.
Right.
We were hanging out in the parking lot. And you come by and you look at me and you nod. And I nod at you and you nod. And I nod again. And then you do this. And I go, and I can't figure out that you're trying to tell me you got the job. And then, of course,
Yeah.
4 minutes later, I get in my car and my agent calls me, and I'm like, "That's what John was trying to tell me." So I
Yeah,
always
that was it.
appreciated that. Always appreciated that.
So I'd like to end with one little thing that when I was a little boy, my mom used to say, ask us, "Hey, Johnny, say 3 words that describe who you are." Hey, Eriq, say 3 words to describe who you are.
Well, driven, flawed, uh, and authentic.
Great. Apparently, when I was 6, I said, "I'm me, I'm Johnny, and I'm a boy."
There you go.
I didn't have any gender issues at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Um, well, gee, Eriq, thank you so much for this. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I very much appreciate it. And I, I look forward to seeing the episode that you just directed with Maura Tierney. And I enjoyed watching you and Gloria doing that romantic comedy on television. That was an expression. I think that the rapport that we created on ER is something that we'll all always have. And if we get to express it professionally, that's great. I recently had lunch on another project that I'm working on with an actor who you just directed. Uh, and he was raving about how the script was a mess and you fixed the whole damn thing, and that you approached him and made him uh, reach inside himself and get better and better and better. It was James Tupper, and he
was
told me to
wonderful.
say thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's, I love storytelling and I have an opportunity to do it in different formats and being able to help actors and talk to actors, but let him know, I was actually going to call his agent. Please let him know that he helped to elevate the product. He trusted and he did his part and it really just elevated it. But that's the magic that we like
Yeah,
when you see
absolutely.
an actor that you believe in and then they deliver, that's the magic. And
Right. And we don't often get to hear that we made an impact but it's delicious to find out that that you did your job and you did it with excellence, and you elevated other people and you gave them the opportunity to elevate the project.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And best of luck to you with this. I hope it's a smashing success, and I'm honored to have done it.
I appreciate it. I've got to stay creative.